Welcome to Perspectives in Mobile, the news podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Join us discussing the world of telecommunications, technology, and mobile innovations. From London, Dario Betti, MEFFYS Award.
Welcome to Perspectives, the podcast from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, where we talk to some of the professionals, the academics, the entrepreneurs out there that are shaping today's world for the mobile ecosystem and all the digital infrastructure where we now share. Now, it's great to talk from one topic to another about the different innovations. But today we're probably also looking at some of the, I would say, important element that goes beyond what is today, the mobile as we know it, but is going and changing into many other parts. Digital service revenue, carrier billing, everything all around it and more, all the evolution we are seeing on the telco infrastructure. And we're doing that with MCP Insight, specifically with Toby Padgham, the Chief Operating Officer at MCP Insight, and David Ashman, the head of compliance at MCP Insight. So I better be on my best behavior with the head of compliance and ask very tough question with the chief operating officer. So welcome both David and Toby. Great. Now, thanks for joining us. Thanks for MCP Insight for being a member of MEF. I should be saying at the same time. If I could start with David. David, how are mobile operators doing right now? What's your perspective in that part of the world for digital services and everything that comes with it?
Well, Dario, it's quite a mixed bag depending on what geo we're talking. MCP are active in around 33 countries and growing. Some of those countries we are at the stage of a very mature and stable market. Others are very near the beginning of that journey, and some have managed to make that journey quite swiftly, and others are still trailing behind. The UK is looking great. We've got countries in the Middle East such as Kuwait that are now looking strong as well, and even South Africa has now got a very strong, robust monitoring process coming through. But yeah, ask me about others and it may be a different picture.
Oh, well, I would probably need to ask you at least the latest, because this is a dynamic market. I mean, it's a market where we as MEF started covering 25 years ago. I think this community is strong and going for a long time. But the last 18 months have been pretty eventful in all parts of digital. So what has changed in this ecosystem of note?
I think major changes, it's not just the last 18 months, but the major changes across the markets. And if you're talking about how long you've been here, Dario, then it's 20 years. Is the digital payments market or digital services market has matured massively from a closed user environment for mobile operators and their customers to one where you've got numerous OTT players. Micropayments have become a big thing. If you're Google Pay or Apple Pay, they probably drive about 75% of carrier billed revenue around the globe. And then you've got the third-party services working off that. And then what they're really eating into now is traditional mobile operator revenues. So messaging, business messaging using SMS, text message is really coming under threat from WhatsApp. Massive companies like that are able to drive it with end-to-end encryption in a closed user environment and be able to scale it, being one platform. Whereas MNOs, obviously, but they're fragmented networks, they have legacy systems. But I think that I'd say over the past 18 months, they're fighting that battle well. We've seen RCS talked about for a number of years, and mobile operators, I suppose, have tried to push it, but haven't had perhaps the coordination across network operator groups that they would hope to drive RCS. You're now seeing a bit of, probably because messaging is under threat, those big revenues, they have to push forward with RCS. I think a real opportunity is if you integrate more marketing into RCS rather than just customer engagement, and then add in payments into that environment as well. You have a big opportunity as a trusted engagement model out to a huge audience of mobile phone users. And then I'd say, as a whole, the payments market, mobile operators need to get on the front foot with a trusted mobile payment mark. In the UK, we used to have Pay For It, which fell by the wayside, I think, over a period of time. But there's no pan-European, there's no cooperation across mobile operators about making a pay by mobile trusted mark. And I think they have a real opportunity to do that. And then obviously, with their huge base, they are big in fintech. There is 1.5 billion unbanked or underbanked mobile operator customers. They have a huge opportunity there that they can capitalize on. But I think as much as anything, the last 18 months is timing. They've got to push out now to fight off the competition and drive new revenue streams.
Oh, thanks, Toby. So there's a lot out there. I like your cross-ecosystem reference. You seem to be saying there's a great opportunity of RCS, where it's a second wave of evolution for payments as well, coming with the integration of two platforms. But if you're an operator, you're under a lot of pressure to deliver on a lot of the margins and potential markets out there that are not as fantastic as they used to be. Let's put it like that. Talking about what you should and should not do, however, I think that's probably what I should ask David. In your view, David, what's a healthy mobile payment ecosystem? Obviously, common traits that you see in markets where mobile payments are thriving and compliant. So what are they? What should you do?
I think the key for what you need to do is to look for building blocks of a sustainable market. Money can be made quickly, but it can also disappear as quickly. We encourage a rounded compliance approach, utilizing the full range of tools and allowing all of those compliance and monitoring tools to talk to each other. That gives you the best opportunity of spotting problems and fixing them. That providers out there are probably asking, well, why fix them? Why not just carry on with bringing revenue in quickly? And the answer is that if you bring in non-compliant revenue with a lot of misleading traffic or indeed direct fraud, that is going to drive up complaints. Mobile networks, or worse still, regulators are then going to need to step in, and the knee-jerk reaction is to close the market or to tar everyone with the same brush, and to close off good, clean, legitimate traffic along with the bad traffic. So it's within everyone's interest to make sure that we are building clean traffic from the get-go, which means that money will not only come in now, but will continue to come in the future. And what's more, it also brings in the bigger brands. So one of the things in the UK that we saw was quite an aggressive regulator, and that regulator was actually allowing complaints to prosper because they wanted to build a case to be able to fine, and their approach was, if we punish hard, it will clean up the market. And for a decade or more, that resulted in a similar level of complaints. The mobile network stepped in with a spot the issue quick and close it down immediately, and the complaints dissipated. And with that, the regulator actually had to be reduced in size, taken from a regulatory organisation focused purely on mobile payments back into a central regulator of Ofcom. And what have we seen? A trusted market, and off that trusted market, the bigger brands of Netflix, of Paramount, of others have now come into a marketplace, driving big revenues. So everyone has won.
Well, thank you. Toby, my job here is potentially to create discord and within companies themselves. Well, you represent the chief operating officer of a company such as MCP Insight that is looking at solutions to provide against the fraud. But from a business perspective, isn't there always a balance that you need to find between growth and governance, between regulations on one side and how to make money on the other side? What's your view on performing high markets and the one that are struggling? Is there something that we can learn from the little trade-off? Where does the tipping point is?
It needs a joined up industry approach to put in the building blocks in place that David was talking about. So, the traits, and a lot of markets have gone through boom bust. We've been around for years with mobile payments, and it tends to be that the revenue teams, operators work with brands and they open the doors, and everyone jumps on the railway track and makes a lot of money. But without the strong governance in place, it tends to blow the doors off. So there's certain parts which industry can't do much about. So a lot of markets would benefit from having a strong regulator in place, comms regulator, top down. That's really important. Other markets where there may be a gap with those rules would put in place independent or self-regulatory bodies. In South Africa, you've got WASPA. In the UK, you had PSA, which has just been brought back into Ofcom. You've got the Dutch regulator as well. They're self-industry organizations which have that good level of independent adjudication, but also sense and communication with the industry where they can put in place a good foundation of rules. So that then moves down to mobile operators having a very strong code of practice. We would work with those mobile operators. There's tried and tested models around the world of how to get it right. We work with those mobile operators to advise them on that. Most importantly is getting the consumer trust. So that means strong security platforms in place, monitoring throughout the value chain. That's where we come in. We can pen test security platforms, work with mobile operators and their partners, their aggregator partners, to test those platforms and make sure they are secure, and to put in place standards and responsibilities down chain. Everybody needs to know what their role is in the value chain for making sure we raise the bar on standards. And that goes all the way through, not only on the standards, but through to how customer care works. Mobile operator is always the default receiver of customer complaints. And if you put in place, but the brands themselves would see themselves holding that contract with the customer quite naturally. So mobile operators in the industry have to work together to say, right, if I'm getting complaints into different parts, how do I route those calls through to the brand or merchant who can deal with those issues quickly? So if you put in place all that framework, you're not going to have the regulator who may sit on a mountain of complaints just come in with jackboots and shut the market down, which is quite a knee-jerk environment. That's what I'd say really is the big difference. The only other thing I'd say which perhaps is a difference is competition. Don't sit on one master aggregator for years and years and years. You need competition at that level, because the more aggregators coming in and competing will bring more merchants into the marketplace, and that creates a healthier environment. Competition always, if you talk to any mobile operator around the world, competition is good because it creates marketing of the mobile payment infrastructure out to the customer base, and you get wider adoption by the merchants. And then I'd say trade bodies in the good markets. In the UK, we have AIM. Internationally, we work closely with MEF. There are other trade bodies who just all work on the good initiatives for putting in place. It could be an anti-fraud basics white paper that should be adopted by industry. It could be best practice with customer care. There's many other cross-industry initiatives that should be adopted. That's what a good, healthy market looks like.
Well, I love the descriptions of a framework, and I love the fact that there is a role for a trade association like us. So let's make sure we push it, or we'll help you to push it forward. But you mentioned some of those specific geographic markets already. So has David in the previous mentioned in Ofcom. So let's go back to that. Let's go back to the geographical version. Let's go back to the differences in the countries. Because so David, what would be, from your perspective, your successful stories that operators and others can learn from? You heard some of those names. I've heard the PSA Ofcom. I've heard the South Africa and WASPA. What else would you add, or what on top would you add?
Yeah, I think the framework that worked so strongly in the UK was having a combination of monitoring the advertising, monitoring and testing the payment experience, and making sure that there is strong due diligence and checks on a provider and a service before it's even allowed to go live. And those three working together, along with in some markets in the fraud blocking engine as well, that mosaic is a perfect combination. Now, what we have struggled with or seen is markets where there's a race to a bottom. You've got players that want to run questionable traffic, and they will play off the compliance houses, they will play off the aggregators to have a race to a bottom with who will allow them the worst quality traffic, who will let them that quality slip. What we saw in Kuwait is an aggregator that wanted to improve the market, despite those attempts to play them off and to move traffic to others that would allow the poor quality. They stuck with us, they used the tools, and over a period of about 6 to 12 months, we saw the quality of advertising improving. We saw what started as very high fraud block rates now move up into a high 99%. So they've now got really good quality traffic. They've got near enough no advertising problems, and they are seeing commercial growth as well. And that's what we love to see in all the other markets. Rather than go through a boom and bust of the UK to get there, they could copy that Kuwait example, take a proactive, self-regulatory approach using the tools available to them, and then they too could see great quality traffic and that commercial growth as well.
So let me go back to some of the words you used, the boom and bust, for instance, David, because that potentially is going to erode the trust, isn't it? That there's coming back, consumers themselves will lose the trust factor. How do we manage trust in the direct carrier billing words, in the idea of using your mobile phone to pay for other things? Because this is a market which is mature, has been around for a long time. So what's your view on that? Are we keeping up with innovation?
I think in terms of innovation of a payment mechanism, you can get the right kind of parameters in a payment mechanism, and you don't necessarily always need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to have that trust there and it works. We saw the traditional payment onto mobile phone bill mechanism try very hard for several years, around a decade, since I came into the market, and really struggled to get traction with big brands. It was very much a niche for small games, voting type services. The big brands did not want to really touch it. Then we saw Apple Pay come around in 2014. Closely after was Google Pay 2015. And almost overnight, they had that huge payment base. Why? Because people know that brand, they trust that brand, and they're happy to jump behind that, both from a brand perspective and as importantly, the consumers trusted it and were happy to spend. So there is a whole body of evidence that says that trust, strong brand is key to actually moving forward. And that's why I think in the UK, now we've gone through that mill and got to a point of a very stable, mature market from bill payments. And now we're starting to see the growth. But in fact, we could have probably seen 15 years back, if only we'd started from that, from where we are now, of a properly managed, self-regulated market.
I'll tell you what, for my daily job here at MEF today, I saw some of the data that I try to keep in mind for our chat. I think it's over $10 trillion that have gone through last year on Apple Pay and Google payment system, which is remarkable figures. I don't understand what you can buy for trillions, but here we go. Quite a few NVIDIAs, just to start, if not Apple itself. 564 million users just on the Apple Pay one. So we're talking of big things. We're going to things that are at scale. And by the way, even for Apple, that's close to 9% of revenue. Apple Pay is a big thing. So David, let's talk about still a bit data, transparency, compliance, but at scale, because some of these things could grow very fast. How is that sustainable, given there's some of the big trajectory where we are seeing in some of this work?
The sustainability comes from connecting the right people from the start. So the due diligence aspect cannot be underrated. You need to check who you're working with. There is an element of trust that goes down the value chain. So working with, first off, trusted aggregators that are going to have your back, and not going to let through poor quality merchants. And then spot checking their work to make sure that the due diligence they do continues to be strong and robust. If you've got the right merchants on board, actually you're probably 80% of the way towards a problem-free existence. But obviously those merchants themselves are trying to use third parties to promote. They're working through the affiliate channels. And we know that the difference between Google advertising and affiliate advertising for compliance rates, Google is very strong. Not perfect, but very highly compliant. Affiliates, very much less so. So merchants, even when they set out with good intentions, also need to use the tools to monitor the advertising through. And where all those three are working together with the same output in mind, then things can work well.
Well, Toby, I haven't forgotten a question. But I'll keep you there for all of those business questions in the end, because we've heard from David what I would probably summarize, and David, tell me if I'm wrong, that supply chain management is one of those key factors. Make sure that you get the right people. But so you serve and that so you are serving they serve you, that are doing the right thing. But some of them, I simply say that fraud is the cost of doing business. In some markets, it's so part of the experience. You see being constantly attacked. Is that true? Is that what we should accept as business people in the direct billing and payments and more?
I mean, fraud is always going to be there, right? It's just a matter of industries keeping pace to put in place the right security. I mean, particularly, we may get onto it later, but I mean, AI and techniques that are being applied by fraudsters can destroy trust rapidly. So when we look at the marketplace, one is we try and share as much information as we can with all of our partners, with mobile operators, because we track fraud. We have our own anti-fraud system, and I really think that any payment mechanic, be it the mobile operator on their payment pages or on the aggregator's payment pages, should implement an anti-fraud system. Because the cost of just carrying on, regardless, without any anti-fraud system, potentially is going to blow up in your face. So, you can lose your customer loyalty base. That's where we've seen certain mobile operators do it better than others. You get a lot of churn going across from mobile operators when there's bill shock and people shutting down their accounts, etc. So it's just about working with the right partners to make sure you have a good process in place and system in place to combat fraud. You'll never be ahead of the game. You just got to be able to stay up with it with avant-garde technique.
you'll never be able to get ahead of a game. It's a constant battle there.
Yeah,
But it's
always.
a battle you cannot afford to fight.
Yeah.
You have to.
I mean, what I would add on top of that, Dario, is that you can't use a fraud blocking engine to make bad traffic good. You can protect the payment mechanism and your reputation by blocking that bad traffic, but it needs to be in combination with blocking that bad traffic and then seeking out good traffic to replace it. And what we do see in countries where fraud has been allowed to prosper for a long time is that when fraud blocking engines are first switched on, there will be a very high block rate, and that is natural, and that is what we saw in Kuwait. But it has been replaced with good traffic. As affiliates are trying to commit that fraud, find that their avenues are blocked, then they are forced, in order to survive, to start to try to feed the good traffic into a system. So it is needing to trust the process, and if that process is trusted, you can reverse a high fraud market into a strong, clean traffic market.
Yeah. And it needs the cooperation down that value chain, because you can identify the fraud players. Okay, they might hide behind, certainly at the affiliate level, different IDs, etc. But if you cut off the money tap to your partners down chain, it will stop fraud. And, it's a matter of working with merchants and educating them on the downside of just letting any kind of traffic through. Switch off, keep the good partners, switch off the bad partners, and you'll see a more sustainable environment that will start to grow and reap the benefits, which will be then rewarded by mobile operators who, if they have a good, stable environment, they can increase out payments, they can improve the flexibility around payment flows, etc., which give a cleaner, quicker checkout experience. But if it moves towards more and more complaints, you'll have more and more restrictions put in place all the time by mobile operators, and that stops innovation.
Let's stick with the mobile operators, because you mentioned before that some of them got burned in their history. What about some other new, or people that want a second bite of the apple and say, I want to go back, grow my business, but protect myself from reputational risk, from the potential regulatory intervention? So what's the magic recipe there? What could you say, Toby, that you could do today in a market to grow, but wisely?
I'd say this is all, look at other markets that have done it well. This, again, let's not reinvent the wheel. There's plenty of good models, and those good models involve what we've discussed before, putting in great governance, but due diligence and risk controls downstream. So you have to build that framework. You have to put in place the right tools, the anti-fraud systems, KYC, know who you're dealing with. Often in certain markets, the boom bust has been created by a mobile operator pulling on board an aggregator partner. The aggregator partner says, yes, we want loads of brands, merchants, all come to us, and they'll open up the taps and it'll blow the market. You need to know who you're dealing with. So working with someone like MCP, we are in, as David said, 30 plus markets around the world. It's not a huge marketplace. We know so many of the merchants. We know so many of the merchants that use different names in different geos. We know their compliance record. We know who's behind causing fraud in certain environments. So the advice we can give to partners looking to put in place the right framework is there. As David said, you've got to have testing. You've got to have the visibility and transparency of what is going on in the marketplace, from the pages that you've licensed to go live, which is the consumer journey. From start to finish, the consumer journey starts at the advertising banner. You have to know what's being advertised. That's where the bad experience starts. You then have to know exactly what landing pages and payment pages are being used. So you need monitoring for that. And then you have to go through to the customer care end and monitor KPIs around, is that customer being responded to within 24 hours to their complaint or their inquiry, or it all escalates. So I'd just say put in place all of these frameworks, the code, starting with a code of practice, but putting in place the monitoring, the anti-fraud systems, etc., the proof of purchase, consent to charge. MCP has tools that can sit on a payment page and track and capture the customer's click on the button, putting in their MISDN, and the PIN to complete a purchase. But we witness independently and verify what they consented to, what terms, is the price there? Does it say subscription? Did they say click buy? Or did they click a wishy-washy button that just says continue and they don't even know that they're getting billed? So put in place all of that trusted governance and security.
So you say that a lot of the best practices, if you want, are there, and by the way, some of them are available as a properly termed compliance as a service mechanics, such as MCP Insight. Now, let me ask you the overall questions. If you were and then an operator today, having to choose between different partners for compliance as a service, what would you tell them that they should be looking for? What would be the key factors that should bring the confidence in the choice of the partner for such a service?
Well, talk to someone independent of the value chain. A lot of aggregators would talk to operators and say they have all the monitoring tools. They know who their clients are. You don't need any independent monitoring system. That backfires. So, as I said before, if you're going to look at basics, just look at the access that a company like us might have to due diligence systems that can scale rapidly and efficiently, that you have the risk, they understand risk control and what systems to put in place to maintain that environment. So, for example, we even risk rate, we work with the aggregator to risk rate their partners. So you can then set different standards or outpayments or whatever it is to the type of service, the type of merchant, etc. The history, how long you've had that merchant on board. So you can then start to open up with more flexible terms to those that you really trust and have been working for you for a long time. So we can pool all of this intelligence. So just get the anti-fraud system. Always have to have that. The consent to charge system has to be there. The compliance monitoring has to be there, and general good, strong independent advice, longevity in the marketplace with a company like MCP. As I said before, we've got all the contacts and connections, and we are a trusted party. We also have, another string to our bow as this market moves quickly. So services and service development and marketing techniques move swiftly. Therefore, you have to work with an agile partner. MCP, we have our own in-house tech team. It's a significant tech team. So that means that our anti-fraud systems, our monitoring systems, can adopt the latest and greatest technologies to make sure that we're on top of it. You don't want to go and work with a partner that has legacy systems and is never evolving.
Well, great. So I'll stick to my next typical questions that I ask everybody, but wouldn't everybody love to know what's in the future for this industry? So what do you think, Toby, that's going to happen in the next 3 years for mobile payments? And what would you think that we should be doing, what operators should be doing, what the industry should be doing right now to prepare for those 3 years of change?
Certainly coming together. You can't do it alone. The very nature of the mobile operator and telco industry is it's fragmented. So I know there's competition law in place. You can't talk about commercials, etc. But if we're looking at protecting the customer and introducing regulatory standards or systems that can benefit all safely, then you've got to come around the table. That's what MEF does. That's what GSMA do. It's joining up and talking about what's required for the mobile industry to really compete with other players out there. So if we go back to the initial part of the conversation around RCS, the mobile operators working well with Google, validation of the brand or merchant, I think, has been quite slow. Everyone's focused on bringing brands on and looking at user cases. That's great because we need user cases of success. If I talk to AIM members or MEF members that have adopted and trialed RCS, you are talking about significant engagement, 70, 80% engagement, which on other channels of marketing, you do not get. So it's a huge opportunity, but at the same time, you've got to build the trust in that model. So if you run to market, if you don't have in place the systems that can scale that verification and validation of merchants, that can look at the agents and be able to map fraud, monitor fraud, then you're putting yourself in a weak position. So everybody does need to invest more in that environment. That's what I would see in 3 years' time. A buoyant marketplace would be RCS is booming. It's got marketing, engagement, payments all integrated in that, and that's a real success. I think the mobile payment standard should be there, a charge to bill brand of some kind, payments by mobile, whatever it may be, but we need something. And I think we are going to see more and more bundling of services. The mobile operators sit on mountains and mountains of data. The ability for a mobile operator, therefore, to be the control platform for subscription management for every consumer, whether it's because you can charge its bill, right? So Netflix, Disney Plus, whatever it may be, Apple, stick it on the mobile bill. If I can cancel and manage my subscriptions in one place, that as a parent, that is gold, because I've got credit cards, bank statements, everything, when my kids seem to be chucking all of these platforms on willy-nilly. So I think there's real scope there. We've got, obviously it's already been pushed in the industry with the digital vending machines, as some would call it, but I see that as a massive opportunity as well. 3 years' time, those three, if we can crack them, then I think we'll be in a better place.
Toby, I think it's compulsory by now for any interviewers or pretending to be like me. I need to ask you about AI. You have not mentioned in that list of 3 things AI. So what's the AI role in others? Real-time analytics, behavioral tracking, all of that in the digital payments, mobile payments area.
Well, it brings huge efficiency. The real difficulty with getting content off the ground and sold through the mobile channel, bearing in mind the outpayments which are there, is the cost of high quality content, high quality service. So AI, if you talk to a few of the, content players that may be members of MEF, AI has been adopted there to, one, aid their content creation, but also personalize that content, monitor the engagement with their customer base, and streamline that content to make it more personalized. That's an example of how AI is really, really useful. The same thing on the advertising front. A lot of the advertisers are using it in exactly the same way, not wasting ad inventory by throwing marketing out there, but using AI to look at the data and control that better. And on our side, we would, we adopt it into all of our systems for the same reason: efficiency, speed, scale. And it does, well, you've got to have the right team, but our team use it really effectively to combat fraud, to monitor data, look at certain log files and data that we may have to identify bad players that we can then enforce down chain with our partners to get out of the marketplace, to create a better environment for everybody. The downside of that is that in the same way AI is being used by the fraud elements of industry, by the bad players, we, as an example, fraud used to be so obvious, right? You'd see spikes in traffic and then run off and say, right, spike in traffic, therefore there's something amiss, I'm going to close down this traffic source. We're looking at fraudulent players acting at scale as individuals, serving individual transactions with different handsets that are very hard to detect. So, used to be very clear. You could work out what a server farm was with generating loads of fraud. It's so hard now without AI and that environment to be able to identify fraud players or fraud traffic, because it's so smart. It's so integrated within real traffic. It's difficult to identify. That's how AI helps us with wider data analysis and looking at behavioral habits.
The two sides of AI. So now for the two sides between Toby and David. Let me ask you, David, for compliance sides, what excites you? And I find compliance exciting, so I'm slightly biased, but try to get there, the real sense of what's happening to the public, in the larger public. What are we expecting the next 3 years from these markets?
Yeah, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to answer that question without sounding like a nerd. I mean, who does find compliance exciting?
Well, a
But-
few of us. Is good.
And I think all of us with children will know the frustration when you can see a way to do things better to protect their best interests and allow them to progress without going through the same mistakes that we've been through. So I guess I get excited when I can help that figurative child entering a new market or a new market growing to jumpstart into that nice, compliant, revenue, sustainable growth phase without going through the mistakes that we've already witnessed in other markets. So yeah, I would love to be able to support this rapid growth phase from the off, but that sustainable traffic from the off as well.
Thank you, David. I think it's time to wrap up our conversations. Time flies, it seems. Let me ask you, because mobile operators has obviously been central to everything we've been saying. Their role in the direct carrier billing is very important. Let's have a message directly to them from both of you. And if you could send a single message, what would that be to mobile operators? We start with Toby and then we'll come to David. How's that? Toby, what's your message to the mobile operator?
I would say outsource your governance, security, and compliance to a strong partner. Now, I would say MCP is that strong partner, but there are others in the marketplace. And so, because we are specialists, the key thing for a mobile operator is being able to save time. They are slim teams now, commercial teams looking after this environment or legal teams looking after this environment. So it is a cost saving to outsource that environment to us, and time saving. They can then focus on how to grow their business.
Great. And David, what would you add on there?
I mean, I would send the message that there's no quick revenues. If it's coming in too quick, or someone's promising you they're going to drop lots of revenue instantly on your lap, it's normally going to be hand in hand with misleading marketing, or in the worst case, fraud. You need to grow slowly, sustainably, but then revenues for the future. And the tools are out there to be able to do that. So good due diligence, work with the right people. Once they're switched on, make sure that they have that fraud blocking and monitoring in place, and they act upon the advice that those systems give them. Make sure your merchants are utilising their own controls on advertising, particularly where they're working with third parties, with affiliates, and that sets the stall out for a really prosperous relationship that can grow, and that trust will bring in the big brands that will bring that strong revenue base and complaint-free revenue. And I think the key to all of this is that those mobile networks need to set the standards. I mean, we can advise and give the standards and good ethics, But unless the mobile network enforces that in a uniform process again across all of the aggregators, then the aggregator with the worst standards will use that to pull revenue away from the good providers, and then they're left in no position but to weaken their standards as well. If the mobile networks deliver strong standards and uniform standards, then they can get that good quality traffic.
Well, thank you, David. And it sounds like you're referring to standards, but equally, you could say Toby used the word framework. One way or another, whether it's one way is defining your policies and they get enacted it, and Toby would say get some help in how to act. I think we got a clear message from the mobile operator from MCP Insight, and I think this is not the last time we're going to hear about all the things you're doing, so we'd love to come back some more of the details of all the things you mentioned today. But for today, as I said, that's all we have time for perspectives. Let me thanks again, Toby and David. Thank you both for joining us. You can listen to us on MEF Radio. Go to MEF.media on your website or download the app on Apple and Android. By the way, no payments there, so I'm afraid MCP Insight can't help to secure, but all things will be fine. If not, come to our website, mef.mobi. For today, that's all. We'll speak again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Perspectives in Mobile. Join us next as we explore telecoms, technology, and mobile innovations. Stay tuned, stay connected, and let's unlock the mobile potential together.